In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 NBA games happening on January 2nd, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 NBA games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start: if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Portland Trailblazers versus New Orleans Pelicans. Portland comes into this matchup short-handed, still without Jrue Holiday, Jerami Grant, Matisse Thybulle, and Scoot Henderson, so this is very much the patched-together version of the Trailblazers. Even so, they had been piecing together some real momentum before Oklahoma City smacked the wind out of them in their last outing, which is often how it goes when a young team starts feeling itself a bit too much. On the other side, New Orleans has ruled out Herbert Jones and DeJounte Murray, with Saddiq Bey showing up on the report as questionable, so they are not exactly spotless, but compared to Portland's list, they look relatively intact. That relatively healthy tag matters, because when a roster still has most of its main scoring and spacing in place, slumps tend to be more mental and rhythm-based than structural, and those can flip fast once a few shots fall. Looking at the numbers, Portland is putting up 116.2 points per game on 44.6% shooting, while giving up 120.3 points on 47.7% to opponents. They are not shy from deep, but at 33.7% from 3 and 77.6% at the line, the offense leans more on volume and rebounding than pure efficiency. That rebounding edge is real, with 45.4 boards per game, and for a short-handed road favorite, controlling the glass is usually the one boring but crucial thing that keeps them from collapsing when the bench units hit the floor. New Orleans, for its part, is scoring 115.6 points on a cleaner 46.1% from the field, but they are leaking 123.1 points on 48.8% allowed, which is a polite way of saying their defense has been generous lately. They hit 34.1% from deep and 79% at the stripe and grab 43.4 rebounds per game, so they are a touch more polished offensively, but not dramatically so. Here is the thing: if you stack these profiles side by side, you get two teams with similar scoring punch, one of them slightly cleaner on offense but softer on defense, and the other more physical on the boards and slightly more battle-tested at grinding out games through effort. That is where Portland as a slight road favorite actually makes some sense. Their rebounding advantage and the way they scrap through undermanned stretches give them a small but meaningful edge in covering a short number, even in a spot where New Orleans feels due to snap out of its funk. Sometimes the simplest angle is the right one. The team that defends just a bit better and wins the glass often sneaks inside the spread, even if the matchup looks close on paper. As our first pick for this matchup, the Portland Trailblazers to win and cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Portland is averaging 116.2 scored and 120.3 allowed, while New Orleans is at 115.6 scored and 123.1 allowed, so at first glance it looks like a scoreboard operator's dream. If you only glanced at those numbers, you might expect something wild and free-flowing, the kind of game that makes anyone holding an under ticket feel instantly regretful. But the shooting percentages add a bit of nuance. Portland's 44.6% from the field and 33.7% from three suggests that some of those point totals are being dragged up by pace and late-game chaos rather than ruthless efficiency. New Orleans is cleaner at 46.1% overall and 34.1% from deep, yet their defense allowing 48.8% from the field and 35.7% from beyond the arc hints at stretches where the game goes sloppy instead of purely up-tempo. Both sides also live with middling three-point accuracy, and that matters for a total. If the outside shots are not falling consistently, you get more empty trips, a few ugly half-court possessions, and those sneaky scoreless stretches that quietly choke off a total that once looked like it was racing toward a high number. Rebounding figures, 45.4 for Portland and 43.4 for New Orleans, also point to a fair amount of contested misses and reset possessions instead of constant, clean runouts. Injuries play into the tempo puzzle too, with Portland missing multiple key players and New Orleans down Herbert Jones and DeJounte Murray, plus Saddiq Bey's status uncertain. Both coaching staffs have extra incentive to control the game a bit more, shorten rotations, and avoid turning this into a track meet. That kind of game plan usually trims a few possessions off the top, which can be the difference between a total that sneaks under and one that drifts over late. So when you blend the slightly shaky shooting, the injuries on both sides, and the likelihood of some choppy stretches, the matchup leans more toward a total that comes in lower than the raw scoring averages might suggest. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Charlotte Hornets versus Milwaukee Bucks. Charlotte walks into this one trying to stop a little slide after back-to-back losses to Milwaukee and Golden State, and now has to walk right back into Fiserv Forum for another crack at the Bucks in the same building. This is the last game of a 4-game regular season set, with Milwaukee already ahead 2-1, so the pressure tilts a bit more on the visitors to punch back if they do not want the series to feel like a walkover. The path for Charlotte to hang around starts on the defensive end, because giving up 123 and 132 points in the last 2 games is basically handing teams a cheat code. They especially struggle inside, where they allow 53.5 points in the paint per game, and that is a terrible setup against a driver who lives in the lane and finishes through contact. With Ryan Kalkbrenner and Mason Plumlee both listed as out in this write-up, the interior looks even softer on paper, which leaves Charlotte very vulnerable to repeated downhill attacks and second-chance touches around the rim. Even if the help defense rotates, constantly collapsing on the paint usually means open kickouts, and that kind of strain shows up late in games when legs are tired and closeouts get a step slower. On the other side, the star forward's return has clearly lifted Milwaukee, as shown by those wins at Chicago and at Charlotte right after he came back. The issue is that they then face-planted in a 1-point loss to Washington, even with his 33 points and 15 rebounds, which is the sort of result that tends to sting a veteran locker room. Games like that often get circled internally because contenders know they cannot keep dropping results to teams far out of the play-in race if they want to climb the Eastern Conference standings. So there is a natural response spot feel here, especially with the schedule getting tougher in the middle of January, and that kind of urgency usually shows more on their home floor. Just 4 days ago, Milwaukee beat this same Charlotte group by 10 points, and they were in front for most of that matchup, which quietly tells you the gap in control between these teams when both are reasonably healthy. As the Stars' minutes rise with more time after the injury, his rhythm and volume should scale up too, which normally pushes Milwaukee's overall performance closer to its top range rather than its floor. Head-to-head, his team is 8-2 straight up in the last 10 meetings and a perfect 5-0 straight up at home against Charlotte, so history at this venue leans heavily to the hosts. Charlotte does play with effort, and you can see they are not mailing it in, but a 4-12 straight-up road record still says those efforts rarely translate into clean road performances for a full 48 minutes. I am not thrilled about laying points with a group that just lost outright as a double-digit favorite to the Wizards. That kind of result sticks out, but it also sharpens focus for the very next outing, especially at home, and all signs lean to the home team being more likely to handle the number here. As our first pick for this matchup, the Milwaukee Bucks to win and cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Charlotte is scoring 115.8 points per game on 45.6% shooting, but they are surrendering 119 points on 48.9% shooting, which is basically a neon sign that says high-scoring environment. They knock down 36.5% of their threes and hit 81% from the line, so when they get hot, they stack points quickly, and those free throws help keep the scoreboard moving when the offense stalls in the half court. Defensively, they allow opponents to shoot 38.8% from deep and still give up those big paint numbers, which is a rough combination because it means both the rim and the arc are a bit too open for comfort. Milwaukee brings its own offensive punch, averaging 113.1 points on an efficient 48.5% from the field. They are shooting 39.7% from three, which is elite territory, and even though they sit at 73.1% on free throws, the volume of quality looks they generate can offset some misses at the stripe. They allow 115.9 points and 46.7% shooting, so they are not exactly locking teams down either, and that kind of trade-off style, score and let score, usually nudges totals upward. With their star forward back and carrying a big offensive load, and Charlotte struggling to protect the rim or the three-point line, it is easy to imagine another game where Milwaukee scores efficiently and the Hornets keep firing enough shots to stay within shouting distance on the scoreboard. Recent context backs that up, too, since just a few days ago this same matchup produced a double-digit win while Charlotte still put enough points on the board to keep things from feeling like a defensive showcase. That one-point loss to Washington, even in a high-usage, high-production game for the Milwaukee Star, suggests this group is living in a rhythm where offense flows and defense wobbles a bit more than they would like. Given Charlotte's poor defensive metrics and their willingness to shoot from deep, plus Milwaukee's strong shooting percentages and tendency to trade baskets, the ingredients for another game that leans toward a higher final score are clearly present, so a total landing above the projected number makes plenty of sense here. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Sacramento Kings versus Phoenix Suns. You look at this matchup on paper and it feels pretty simple, right? Phoenix at home, 19-14 on the season, fresh arena, that desert crowd buzzing, and a Sacramento team stumbling in at 8-26 on a 5-game road skid. The spread reflects that story, a big number hanging out there that basically says the Suns should cruise. But when you start peeling back the layers, it gets a lot less comfortable laying all those points. Sacramento is bad, yes, but they are not lifeless. They are a veteran-heavy group that still plays with pride, and that matters when you are catching a big number on the last leg of a rough road swing. You can almost picture how their coaches are framing this one in the locker room. Nobody expects us to win this game, so let us just play our game, ignore the scoreboard, and fight every possession. That mindset is very different from the weight that sits on the shoulders of a big home favorite expected to take care of business. Veterans like DeMar DeRozan and Dennis Schroeder know how to keep a game from getting completely away, slowing things down, getting to their spots, and forcing defenses to work late in the clock instead of just running up and down in a track meet. Russell Westbrook adds that chaos element too, but it is the kind of chaos that can be annoying for a favorite because even if his jumper is up and down, he keeps pressure on the rim and piles up free throws. The Kings' season has been wrecked by injuries, no question. Domantas Sabonis, the hub of their offense, has been sidelined with that left knee issue, and Zach LaVine has been dealing with his ankle, which is why you have seen so many games where Sacramento is piecing things together on the fly with different lineups. Drew Eubanks has also spent time out with a thumb injury, so the front court rotation has looked like a nightly puzzle. But here is the interesting part. Being shorthanded has forced them to lean into weird lineups and long stretches from role players like Maxime Reynaud, Keon Ellis, and Dario Saric, and those guys have responded with real energy. You can feel it in recent box scores and game flow, even in losses. This has become more of a scrap and survive team than a fragile one. That identity is often exactly what you want from a big underdog. On the Suns side, the story is a lot cleaner, but that does not mean the margin will be. They are coming home from a solid road trip that ended with a slap in the face at Cleveland, where they got behind early and never really recovered, even though Devin Booker went nuclear in the second half trying to drag them back into it. That type of loss tends to sharpen a good team's focus defensively in the next outing, but it can also make them more conservative. Instead of trying to win by 30, a coaching staff in this spot is usually preaching discipline, no turnovers, and clean rotations, especially with Jalen Green still out with that hamstring and Grayson Allen not at 100% as he manages his knee. You end up with a version of Phoenix that is still better, still physical, still aggressive, but also a bit more controlled and less likely to run themselves into unnecessary risk late if they are already in command. Stylistically, this version of Phoenix thrives on pressure. They are near the top of the league in steals per game and love to turn live ball turnovers into easy points the other way. That is the scary part if you are backing Sacramento, but the Kings do have one thing going for them against that kind of opponent. Their primary ball handlers are savvy. Banged up as they are, they still have multiple guys who can initiate offense, and that spreads the risk. Schroeder can get you into a set. Westbrook can break a press by himself. DeRozan can just walk the ball up and live in the mid-range, almost ignoring the three-point line entirely. That is not pretty modern basketball, but it is exactly the sort of old-school, two-at-a-time offense that can slow a game's rhythm and keep things from spiraling into a blowout tempo. And honestly, you can feel the number being influenced by Sacramento's overall defensive reputation as much as by anything they are doing tonight. They are near the bottom of the league in defensive metrics, which is why odds makers are happy to hang a big double-digit spread and see if anyone is brave enough to take the points. But there is a difference between being bad and being non-competitive. Even in their recent losses, they have hung around for long stretches against better teams before fading late. You saw that script against Boston, where they went into the fourth tied before the wheels came off. That type of pattern, hanging in for 3 quarters then losing by a respectable but not absurd margin, is exactly how an underdog like this can still sneak inside a big number. So you put it all together, a Suns team that is clearly better, yes, but also coming off travel, still managing injuries on the perimeter, and likely more interested in a comfortable, professional win than a showy blowout. A Kings team that is overmatched but full of proud veterans, weird rotational energy, and absolutely nothing to lose on the road. Add a spread sitting in that uncomfortable double-digit zone, and it starts to feel less like a formality and more like a spot where the underdog has a very real chance to hang around just enough to matter for bettors. As our first pick for this matchup, the Sacramento Kings to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. The total is sitting in the mid-220s, around that 226.5 neighborhood, which sounds right if you only remember the old Kings who wanted to run, gun, and chuck threes all night. But this version of Sacramento is playing a very different kind of basketball, not by choice, but by circumstance. Without Sabonis organizing everything from the elbows, their half-court offense turns into more isolation, more mid-range, and more stops and starts. Think of it like going from a sleek sports car to an older, slightly battered sedan. It still gets you from point A to point B, but there is more noise, more grinding, and the trip definitely takes longer. You can see it in their recent scoring. They are not exactly exploding on anyone right now. Against the Lakers, they managed 101. Against the Celtics, 106. Those are not the numbers of a team that is regularly dragging games over a high total on its own. A lot of their possessions end with DeRozan walking into a mid-range jumper, Schroeder probing for something small, or Westbrook putting his head down at the rim. There are fewer quick trigger threes, fewer one-pass pull-ups, and that naturally trims the number of total possessions. When a team with that profile runs into a focused defense, you get long stretches where the scoreboard just kind of sits there. Phoenix, on the other hand, is a bit of a paradox for totals. On one side, they have a dynamic scorer in Booker, a physical wing in Dillon Brooks, and some serious size inside with guys like Mark Williams and Nick Richards, so they absolutely can put up points in spurts. On the other side, their identity this season has quietly shifted toward disruptive defense, leading the league in steals, flying around in passing lanes, and ranking among the better teams in opponent three-point percentage is not an accident. That type of defense creates some easy transition buckets, sure, but it also drags opponents into messy, frustrating possessions where they use most of the shot clock just to find a decent look. The overall rhythm of the game gets choppy. Choppy games are not usually friendly to high totals. Another subtle factor here is personnel on the Suns' perimeter. Jalen Green is still out with that hamstring strain, and Grayson Allen has been dealing with his knee. That removes or limits 2 sources of quick offense. Green is a microwave scorer who can turn a quiet quarter into 15 points in a flash. Allen is a movement shooter who can help blow a game open from beyond the arc. When those guys are absent or restricted, the offense leans even more on Booker and a lot more on grinding through sets. It is effective, but again, it is not the kind of free-flowing, everyone flying, 10 players in double figures environment that usually pushes a total to the high side. Then there is the blowout script to think about, which weirdly often helps the under instead of the over. If Phoenix does what the market expects and builds a comfortable lead in the second half, you usually get a long stretch of slower, more deliberate basketball. Coaches empty the bench a bit. Starters take shorter rotations. Both sides are more interested in getting out healthy than in chasing one more 3 in the final 2 minutes. The clock keeps moving. You get a few possessions where guys dribble the air out of the ball and are totally fine with a late shot clock attempt. It does not look pretty, but it is exactly the sort of late-game pacing that quietly strangles a high total that seemed very alive after 3 quarters. Sacramento's side of that same script points the same direction. If they keep it close, it is usually because they have turned the game into a bit of a slog and leaned on their veterans to slow things down and get to the line. That is not an environment that pushes pace. If they fall behind, they do not really have the roster right now to instantly flip a switch and launch 33s in a quarter. They will push a bit more, sure, but a lot of those possessions still run through mid-range and drives rather than quick bombs. Either way, the structure of how these teams are built and who is actually on the floor pushes the flow towards something more controlled than the raw number might suggest. So when you line up the current versions of these two teams, their injuries, their tendencies, and the likely game script, the picture that emerges is not some wild 130 to 120 shootout, but something more muted. Enough offense to be entertaining, enough shot making to keep you watching, but also enough defensive edge from Phoenix and enough offensive clunkiness from Sacramento that this total feels a touch generous to the scoring. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Oklahoma City Thunder versus Golden State Warriors. This will be the third meeting of the season between Oklahoma City and Golden State, and it comes with a pretty familiar setup. The Thunder are rolling, and the Warriors are trying to hang on at home with a banged-up roster. Golden State has already ruled out Draymond Green and Seth Curry, while Al Horford and Stephen Curry are both questionable, which is a brutal combination for a team that relies so heavily on its veterans to stabilize things. On the other side, Oklahoma City is also shorthanded, missing Jalen Williams, Isaiah Hartenstein, and Ousmane Dieng among others, so this is not exactly a clean injury report on either bench. Even with that context, the storyline is simple enough. The Warriors have some momentum, they are back in their own building, and they would absolutely love to use this spot as a statement game, but they are priced as underdogs against a Thunder team that keeps finding ways to impose its will. Honestly, that says a lot about where these two franchises are right now, both on paper and in the betting market. We already have a two-game sample between these teams this season, and it has not been subtle. Oklahoma City cruised 126-102 at home on November 11th, jumping all over Golden State early and never really letting them breathe. Then on December 2nd, the defending champions went into San Francisco and still handled business 124-112, even when the Warriors made a push in the second half. When a matchup produces back-to-back double-digit wins like that, it is hard not to treat it as a real signal rather than random noise. Exactly 1 month later, there is not much evidence that the fundamental dynamics have changed. Yes, the Thunder are without Hartenstein and Jalen Williams inside, which sounds like a big problem on paper, but reserve center Brandon Carlson has shown he can plug the gap and stay within the system. He just put up 12 points, 7 rebounds, and a block in 20 minutes during a 124-95 demolition of Portland, and the box score matched the eye test. He looked comfortable, not like a stopgap. That matters even more against this particular opponent because Golden State is not really built to punish teams in the paint right now. Their attack is still driven by Stephen Curry at point guard and Jimmy Butler on the wing, with Quinton Post at center providing spacing and touch but not exactly a terrifying low-post hammer. So Oklahoma City's weakened front line is facing a team that prefers to stretch the floor instead of pounding it inside, which softens the impact of their injuries quite a bit. Golden State's schedule spot also adds a subtle but important layer. Steve Kerr's group is back home after an Eastern Conference road trip where they played 3 games in the last 5 days, and that kind of travel usually hits the legs on defense and on the glass more than it does the crowd energy. Even with a day off on Thursday, there is a real chance this team is still carrying some road fatigue, both mentally and physically. Now, it is not all negative on the Warriors' side. They are coming off a solid week, and they have generally played their best basketball at home, where the role players are more comfortable and the communication is cleaner. The problem is depth, or really the lack of it. When they are missing Draymond completely and might be without Curry as well, it becomes very hard to trust their rotation for 4 quarters, especially against a deep Thunder squad that can throw waves of capable bodies at you. From a matchup history angle, the trend is also pretty clear. Oklahoma City has already beaten Golden State by double digits twice this season, and the Thunder have taken 6 of the last 8 head-to-heads overall. The current point spread is described as not too crazy, which implies we are not talking about some huge tax on the favorite, and the gap between these teams only grows if Curry is ruled out, which would shift even more responsibility onto a thinner Warriors supporting cast. Stacking all those pieces together, you end up with a profile that leans heavily toward Oklahoma City continuing to be the more reliable side against the spread, even if the narrative around Golden State at home feels tempting. As our first pick for this matchup, the Golden State Warriors to win and cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. The Thunder are averaging 122.2 points per game on a blistering 49.4% from the field, while holding opponents to 107.6 points on 43.3% shooting. That is the classic combination of elite scoring and high-end shot making, which tends to drag most games into relatively high totals, even when the defense is strong. From the perimeter, Oklahoma City is knocking down 36.7% of its three-point attempts and hitting 83.2% at the free throw line, which is a big deal for totals bettors since free throws are free points in late-game scenarios. They also grab 44.4 rebounds per game and allow 37.4% shooting from deep. so there is a fairly steady diet of extra possessions and three-point variance built into their box scores. Golden State's statistical profile fits a higher scoring script as well, just in a slightly different way. The Warriors are scoring 115.6 points per game on 45.6% shooting and allowing 113.4 points on 46.5%, which hints at a defense that bends a lot and sometimes breaks against quality offenses. They are hitting 36.3% from beyond the arc and 82.3% at the stripe, and they pull down 43.6 rebounds per night while allowing opponents to shoot 34.3% from three. When you put these two styles together, you get a matchup that naturally leans toward scoring. Oklahoma City brings a high-powered, efficient attack that does not waste many trips, and Golden State brings enough firepower, especially from deep, to trade blows and keep the scoreboard moving even if they are outmatched in certain areas. The Thunder's ability to score efficiently against a defense that has been giving up solid shooting nights, plus the Warriors' own perimeter shooting and free throw reliability, creates a realistic path to a game that stays lively for all four quarters rather than grinding down into a defensive battle. So, taken as a whole, the statistical trends and playing styles here point toward a contest where both teams can get their points and where the final total has plenty of room to land above a typical number for an NBA game between these two. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Memphis Grizzlies versus Los Angeles Lakers. Crypto.com Arena on a Friday night is one of those places that already feels tilted toward drama before the ball even goes up, and this matchup fits that vibe perfectly. You have a Los Angeles team sitting at 20-11 at home, carrying the favorite tag by about 4 points, and across from them a Memphis group at 15-18 that has basically lived on chaos and stubbornness just to stay in the Western race. On paper, it looks simple. In practice, it very rarely is. Here is the thing. The foundation for this number is pretty clear. The Lakers are built around a superstar pairing that might as well have been created in a video game, with Luka controlling everything from the top and LeBron still bending defenses from the wing. And that is before you even talk about a big like DeAndre Ayton quietly punishing smaller front courts inside. That core is intact for this one, and that matters a lot more against a short-handed opponent than losing some helpful but secondary pieces. Austin Reeves, Rui Hachimura, Gabe Vincent, and Adu Thiero are all out. Jared Vanderbilt is banged up, so the rotation is thinner, but the hierarchy is clean. The stars are playing, the roles are defined, and the offense still starts with one of the best pick-and-roll operators on the planet sharing the floor with one of the smartest forwards the league has ever seen. On the other side, Memphis is the kind of team that never seems to admit it should be tired, even when the injury report reads like a novel. They have embraced a free-flowing system under their new coach that leans into ball movement, quick decisions, and energy, which suits their personnel, but the depth chart has been hammered. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Jalen Wells are carrying question marks for this game, while names like Brandon Clark, Zach Edey, Ty Jerome, John Conchar, Scottie Pippen Jr., and Vince Williams Jr. have already been parked on the shelf for now. Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. keep them dangerous, no doubt, but every extra absence squeezes the margin for error when you are walking into a building where the home side is used to playing with a lead and feeding off the crowd. If you zoom out from the names and just think like a bettor for a moment, the handicap starts to look less mysterious. The favorite is the team that can create high-quality shots in more ways, that can survive the inevitable cold stretches, and that can afford a bad 5-minute run without completely unraveling. Los Angeles checks those boxes right now far more often than Memphis does. They have won a strong chunk of their games when their offense clicks into that familiar rhythm above the mid-1 teens, and that tracks with what your eyes tell you when Luka and LeBron are humming together. Memphis, by contrast, has frequently been asked to punch up against bigger numbers when catching a handful of points, and the record there tells you what the market is punishing, with a long list of nights where they hung around but failed to stay inside the number by the final buzzer. Honestly, it feels like one of those spots where the underdog can make noise in spurts, but the ceiling and control still sit with the team that has the ball in Luka's hands most of the night. As our first pick for this matchup, the Los Angeles Lakers to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. The odds makers are hanging a total in the high 230s, which already tells you they are expecting a track meet more than a rock fight. That is not random. If you simply stitch together what these two teams average on both ends, you land right around that low 230s band where Los Angeles typically scores in the high 1 teens and Memphis is sitting in the mid 1 teens, while both allow roughly that same range back. So this number is not a wishful fantasy, it is an invitation to ask whether tonight's rhythm leans closer to standard high-scoring night, or both teams emptying the clip. Memphis absolutely nudges things toward the higher side. Their identity right now is built on tempo, attacking early in the clock and sharing the ball. They rebound at a high level, which is not just a nerdy stat thing. It is the trigger for a lot of their offense, because every secure board can turn into Ja Morant sprinting at a backpedaling defense or a shooter trailing to the line. They rack up assists because they are constantly driving, kicking, and re-driving, and that style almost guarantees that you are not getting a slow chess match 48 minutes. You have already seen what this looks like when it goes to the extreme, with that 139-136 overtime thriller against Philadelphia, or the night where they gave up a 140-plus spot to Miami. Those games are not accidents. They are what happens when a fast team that shares the ball also leaks points when it has to defend in space for 4 quarters. The Lakers pull in the opposite direction on pace, at least a little, but they lean the same way on scoring. Their pace number sits just under league average, yet the offense lives in that sweet spot where they score plenty without needing 100 possessions to get there. Luka's usage is sky high, which means a lot of deliberately constructed half-court sets, but that does not slow the scoreboard, it just concentrates the quality of shots. When he and LeBron are cooking, you get a steady diet of switches being punished, closeouts getting attacked, and shooters stepping into rhythm threes, while Ayton feasts on the crumbs inside. That is how you end up with a team that scores over 116 points per night with good efficiency and still somehow feels like it leaves a few easy ones on the table most evenings. And if you peek at their totals history, especially in this building, you see a consistent pattern of games where both teams trade punches and the final sum sneaks or sprints past what was posted before tip. Put those pieces together and tonight looks much more like a make or miss game than a first 1 to 90 wins throwback. Both defenses can be stretched, both offenses have clear paths to good looks, and both point guards are comfortable pushing the tempo when they smell advantage. If this stays competitive for 3 quarters, you are talking about multiple stretches where neither side strings together stops. A long parade to the free throw line and maybe a few of those late possessions where the trailing team extends the game with fouls while the leaders keep adding single points at the stripe. That is exactly the kind of environment where totals that already look lofty can still be cleared because the offensive talent on the floor keeps manufacturing chances long after most games would have settled down. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.